We have this habit of putting people like Leonardo da Vinci on a pedestal. We call them geniuses or legends, but in doing so, we're actually distancing ourselves from them. We make it sound like they were born with a different brain, like they had a superpower we didn't have. But if you look at his early life, his biggest advantage wasn't a high IQ. It was his lack of a proper education. Because he was born into a family that wasn't officially married, the high ranking schools in Florence wouldn't take him. He was unlettered. He didn't spend his teenage years memorizing Latin texts or debating religious theories that had been settled for centuries. Instead, he was outside. He was watching how the wind hit the grass. He watched as water swirled around a rock on the stream. He called himself a disciple of experience. He believed that if you want to know how the world works, you don't look it up in a book written by a man who lived 500 years ago. You go to the source. This forced him to develop a unique visual vocabulary. While other students were learning how to argue, Leonardo was learning how to see. He realized that the eye is the window to the soul, but it was also the most precise measurement tool we have. If you can draw a bird in flight, you are starting to understand the physics to lift, even if you don't have the math for it yet. This is the first pillar of his mind. Trust your eyes over your teachers. Look at his art, but not as art. Look at it as if it's a form of visual research. Most people look at the Mona Lisa and talk about the smile, but let's look at the background. Notice how the landscape on the left doesn't quite line up with the landscape on the right? That wasn't a mistake. Leonardo was playing with how our eyes process depth. He was creating a sense of movements in a still image. He was hacking the human optical nerve, pioneered Mato, that smoky transition between colors. He realized that in the real world, there are no hard outlines. If you look at a mountain in the distance, it doesn't have a black line around it. It's a soft blue blur caused by the atmosphere. He called this aerial perspective. He was the first to realize that air isn't empty. It has a density and color. Then there's his use of geometry. He was obsessed with the golden ratio. He believed that beauty wasn't an option. It was a frequency. When he painted the Last Supper, he didn't just paint people at the table. He built a stage. Every single line in the room, the ceiling, the beams, the floor tiles, points directly to one spot, the center of the image. He was using math to force your brain to look exactly where he wanted you to look. He was designing your experience before you even walked into the room. Something people often forget is that Leonardo was an incredible musician. He played the lyre, he sang, and he was famous for hosting massive theatrical parties. But being Leonardo, he couldn't just play an instrument. He had to re-engineer it. He designed the viola organista, a machine that used a series of rotating wheels to bow strings, like a piano that sounds like a whole orchestra of violins. It's a beautiful, complex mess of gears and silk strings. He was trying to find a way to make music infinite. On a piano, the sound dies out as soon as you hit the key. But Leonardo wanted a sound that could breathe, like a human voice. This led him into a stage design. He built the first automated stage set in history. For a play called Orpheus, he built a mountain that would literally split open and rotate using hidden pulleys and weights. To the audience in 1490, this must have felt like magic. But for Leonardo, it was just another application of physics. He understood that whether you are building a bridge or a musical instrument, the rules of tension and resonance are the same. To him, a song was just an equation played in the air. To really understand Leonardo, we have to follow him into the basement of the hospital in the middle of the night. At this time, people thought the body was a mystery that shouldn't be touched. But Leonardo saw it as the ultimate machine. He dissected over 30 bodies in his life. He wasn't just looking at muscles. He was looking at how a tendon pulls a finger. He was the first person to accurately draw the human spine. He was the first to realize that the heart has 4 chambers, not 2. He discovered that the heart is a muscle that pumps by twisting, like someone wringing down a wet towel. He spent months studying the tongue of a woodpecker. Why? Because he wanted to understand how a living thing could absorb a shock that would normally shatter a skull. He wasn't just curious about the sake of being curious. He was looking for the blueprint of life. He wanted to know how nature built the world so that he could build things that were just as efficient. He was a designer who happened to use a paintbrush because that was the best tool he had at the time. He was searching for the code beneath the skin. In 1484, a plague hit Milan and killed nearly half the population. Most people saw it as a curse from God. Leonardo saw it as a design flaw. He realized that the city was too cramped, too dirty, and had no way to move waste away from the people. So he sat down and designed the ideal city. It was a multi-level metropolis. The top level was for pedestrians and beautiful walkways. The bottom level was for trade, horses, and a massive system of canals to wash away trash. This was hundreds of years before urban planning was a profession. He even sent a letter to the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, offering to build a bridge that would span the Golden Horn in Istanbul. It was a single, massive arch, so big that people thought it was physically impossible. They turned him down, but in 2001, modern engineers built a version of that bridge in Norway using his original sketches. It worked perfectly. He had calculated the weight-bearing loads long before we had the math to prove him right. He didn't just live in the world, he wanted to fix it. There's a list of Leonardo's works, and almost half of them are labeled unfinished. For a long time, historians called him a procrastinator. They said he lacked focus, but if you think like a designer, finished is a weird concept. Is a piece of software ever truly finished? Or is it just at a stage where it's good enough for now? For Leonardo, the painting was just the byproduct of the research. Once he had figured out how the light hit the skin or how the perspective worked in the background, the puzzle was solved. He didn't need to fill every corner of the canvas to satisfy a client. He had already gotten what he came for, the knowledge. He once wrote, "Art is never finished, only abandoned." He lived his life in a state of constant beta. He would go back to the Mona Lisa year after year, adding tiny microscopic layers of paint to make it look just a little more alive. In our world today, we are told to specialize. We are told to pick one thing and just be the best at it. But Leonardo shows us that the most interesting things happen at the borders, where art meets math, where biology meets engineering. He wasn't a man who knew too much. He was a man who refused to stop asking why. So, the next time you feel more like you're interested in too many things, or you're worried that you haven't found your lane, remember Leonardo. The world isn't a collection of separate boxes. It's one giant, beautiful machine. And your only job is to figure out how it works. Stay curious. See you in the next one.